Welcome to the Planning to Win podcast. My name is Tom Lakatos. I'm a senior vice president at Lincoln Investment. The likelihood of your success financially increases when you are able to articulate your goals, when you share them with other people, and you write them down. In our experience as advisors, we can help you with some of the basic building blocks around financial planning and tackle some of the more common questions to help jumpstart your planning. And we're looking forward to bringing that to you in this series.
It really gives you the control over your money and how you want that gift to be used as well.
There's big differences between saving in a 529 and saving in an UGMA or an UTMA. And what's good is you get the tax deduction right away and you get flexibility over where those funds go. Welcome to Planning to Win. My name is Tom Lakatos. I'm a senior vice president at Lincoln Investment, and I lead a team of advisors that work out of our corporate office in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. And we deal with, roughly clients that have collectively about $1.3 billion in assets, ranging from those just getting started with investing to some really high net worth situations. And this month, November, is National Arts and Humanities Month. And given that, we thought it would make sense to focus a little bit on charitable gifting. We spoke earlier this month with Eric Sauter. Eric is an advisor on my team with a specialty in tax. We talked a lot about why people give, the size, the amount of time and the amount of money Americans spend every year. We talked a little bit about why, and we talked predominantly about the tax benefits of doing so. Today, I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Zach Toombs. Zach is an advisor on our team. He's based out of North Jersey. Zach, good to see you again. How are you?
Awesome. Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure, man. I'm glad to have you back. So Eric and I, last time we spoke, Eric and I really kind of got into, why people give. And we spent the bulk of our time really on the tax benefits. As we know, clients typically with means leverage gifting strategies regularly. I want to start with you, and I promise that in today's session, you and I'd get into some of the mechanics and the how behind it. Why don't we start with this? People give every day, right? And last session, we talked about the fact that you don't have to be wealthy to make a meaningful impact. We see people doing fundraisers for Susan G. Komen or their nonprofit organizations and GoFundMes, and they give money on Sundays at the plate in church, and they write checks every year to their alma mater. Can you talk just a little bit? What are some of the more common gifting strategies that you see on a regular basis, Zach?
Yeah, of course. And like you mentioned, it's the everyday, day-to-day things like giving to your church, giving to your university, things like that. I think when, gifts come to mind, a lot of people jump right to 529s, UGMA and UTMA accounts for grandchildren and just kind of putting money into their name. But there's really a whole other, complex part about gifting that really depends on, who you're giving it to, when you want to give it, and how you want to give it. Really gives you the control over your money and how you want that gift to be used as well.
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about that, right? Because, just even in your example, right, if you think about, saving for a kid's education, right, there's big differences between saving in a 529 and saving in an UGMA or an UTMA, right? UGMA being a Uniform Gift to Minors Act, irrevocable by nature. Talk just a little bit about sort of that element of control. It comes up a lot.
And there's some gray lines between them. So with the 529s, again, really directed towards college. So when you're gifting, again, it's going to come down to what do you want the gift to be and who do you want it to be for? So with 529s, it's going to be education specific, and there's going to be some taxable implications. Same thing with an UTMA and UGMA. If you want to put money towards your grandchildren's school and you put it into an UGMA, you might have some negative implications down the road with FAFSA, with getting financial aid and things like that. So yes, you're giving. Everybody loves gifts, but with planned gifts, we want to make sure we're doing it in the most efficient way.
Yeah, well, and not only that, I think about like in this day and age, we talk about this kind of stuff a lot, right? When you talk about who's it for and for what purpose, right? So, I'll give you an example on the other end, right? We've seen this before where, somebody saves for a child's education and they use an UGMA or an UTMA. What they don't realize is the minute that child becomes age of majority, that's their asset. Right? The parent or grandparent that saved for it, it's no longer theirs to direct and control. And that kid can do whatever they want with it. And frankly, if they didn't want to go to college and wanted to buy a, Tesla with it, they could. Or, God forbid they have there's a lot of challenges in a lot of families around chemical addictions these days, right? You give the wrong kid a large sum of money at 18 or 21 and you could be causing some problems for that child. Right.
And
So
that goes back to, when do you want to give your gift as well? Because another thing people commonly use is their estate plans, their wills, life insurance to give to, a beneficiary or a loved one. And again, that's something that transfers the assets to them at that time. So, God forbid something were to happen to you and you weren't planning for it, your gift may go over sooner than you had planned.
Yeah, well, and that element of control is also applicable. We see it sometimes, when we help people create legacies as an example for their church, right? A standard question in our process is if you give to your church on a regular basis, our target number is $6,000 or more a year, right? That means in a tithing situation, you make at least $60,000, you tithe 10% of your income to your church. That's not uncommon these days in most faiths, right? So the idea is then, what if you, instead of giving them $6,000 on Sundays, you gave them $3,000 on Sundays, and you took the other $3,000 as an example, and you purchased a life insurance policy, and you made the church the beneficiary, right? Maybe you can get somewhere between $250,000 to $500,000 of death benefit, right? How many years do you have to give them $3,000 on Sunday before it adds up to $250,000 or $500,000? And can you do that in your lifetime? The answer is probably not. And then you think about that control, where that comes into play is if you own the policy and you make the church the beneficiary, you lose the $3,000 tax deduction, but you remain in control of the policy. So if your needs change later, maybe the church does something 15 years from now you don't like, you could change the beneficiary on that policy. The flip side is if you wanted to retain the tax benefit, the church would own the policy. You'd get the $3,000 tax break, but it's their policy. And it's theirs to do with what they want. So I think you're spot on. Now let's talk and shift gears just a little, Zach, as you think about sort of higher end planning, right? So now we're talking about clients that really have some resources. Maybe they've got some appreciated stock positions. Maybe they got appreciated real estate. It's not just cash donations that they can make typically. We've talked a lot about it. We think about it really in three buckets. I want you to just touch on each one. Start with this one. Charitable giving during your lifetime, right? These are people using things like donor advised funds. They might have a private foundation. Talk a little bit about that one for me.
Yeah. Of course. So during our lifetime, we're going to have some funds that maybe we want to give today, or we want to set aside for the future, for the charity, the beneficiary. So donor advised funds are a great way. You mentioned a lot of times how, people think gifting is really for the wealthy. Donor advised funds are a way with, a couple $1,000s, you can get it started. It gives you flexible contributions, and you can choose different grants to give along the way to the charities of your choice. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility. Again, the control that we talked about earlier. And again, it helps you leverage different financial accounts to give the gifts to who and when you want to give them.
Yeah,
like we talked about.
Yeah, and what's good is you get the tax deduction right away, and you get flexibility over where those funds go. How do private foundations work? We've seen some wealthier clients do those.
You see those a lot, especially with celebrities. You see them a lot. Those are a little bit more expensive to set up. Those are going to be more of a larger one-time contribution up front, where you're going to have a board of trustees managing this foundation. There's going to be a set, guideline of rules that they need to follow to manage the charity. So a little bit less flexible, a little bit more costly to set up. But again, when we're talking about control, it gives you and that board of trustees more control about what they're doing with your gift.
Yeah, well, and I think it's a way for people to extend their legacy beyond their lifetime. I'm familiar with a few where, it's also a way to employ your family members. Sometimes if you're looking for tax deductions, a good way to do it is employ family members. So there's a lot of flexibility to that. And usually those are strategies that you would use if you wanted to create a charitable gifting strategy during your lifetime. We often see, Zach, people too that want to start charitable giving, but at the same time, they want to create an income for themselves or somebody else. Talk a little bit about some ways you might do that.
Yeah. So a great example of that is a charitable remainder trust. Basically, how that trust would work is you can make a contribution to the trust, oftentimes with highly appreciated assets. And what that is going to do is, the money will go into the trust. Usually they'll have a certain amount of income, whether it's an annuitized plan or based on the amount of the assets in the plan, that will distribute income for 10, 20 years or the rest of your life, with the remaining assets going to that charity of your choice at the end.
Yeah, these are really good for people with appreciated positions, right? Because the investment income gets exempt from tax. It's a tax. Usually, it's a tax exempt transaction when you make the donation for the trust. Talk about what if, and you mentioned, using it potentially as an annuity option or as a cash option. I think the difference being if you do the annuity option, you get a little more flexibility around the amount. I think if you choose the option where it's a fixed 5% of the investment that comes back to you in the form of income. Talk about charitable lead trusts. They work similar, except you're not the recipient of the income, right? It's somebody else.
Of course. So charitable lead trusts, again, a little bit of a flip there. So with the charitable lead, the charity is going to be receiving that income for the set period of time, with the assets then going to your, beneficiary at the end of that period. So kind of a flip of the charitable remainder we had just talked about. And there's a lot of tax implications in terms of what you can deduct and then what the income would be taxed at. That's more of a personal thing if that's something you're looking at. But just a little bit of the nuances between the two.
Yeah, and I think from a tax perspective, one of the big things to note is charitable lead trusts aren't generally tax exempt. So it's a little bit, depending on your situation, we see a lot more charitable remainder trusts than we see charitable lead trusts, usually for that reason. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, let's talk just a little bit about ways to leave a legacy, right? Again, we talked a little bit in the beginning. What are you typically seeing here with clients, and how do you have them think about it usually?
Yeah, so typically when people think of a legacy, we're really going to be doing that through life insurance, through our will and testament, and through estate planning. Really, what do we want our money to do when we're gone? And using life insurance, again, that's a policy that pays out when we die. We know it's the only insurance claim that we'll ever have. So it's often, one of the best products to use when we're looking at legacy planning. Planning for what is our money going to be doing after we're done.
Yeah, well, it's it's interesting. Like, I'll give you an example. This is really common, Zach. I'm sure you've seen it in your client base. But here at Lincoln, for those of you that may not know, this firm was started really as helping educators save money, right? Our first client in 1968 was the School District of Philadelphia, and the firm grew up in the 403B markets. Today, we're far more diversified. That's not the only market, but we still are heavily involved in professional advisors in the 403B space. We have over 4,000 school contracts nationwide. And while it's not our only business, it's still a significant business for a lot of our advisors. And oftentimes, this is a real world situation. We had a client, and Zach, you may remember this. We talked about it when it came up in class, and as we review casework. The clients were 40 and 38-year educators in the state of California, both retired educators. They had combined with that length of service, they had combined pension income, roughly $13,500 a month. And frankly, they managed their finances well through their life. They were in retirement with about $2,200 a month in expenses. So they were running about $11,300 a month income surplus. And they had accumulated over their working life combined about $900,000 in 7 403Bs from school districts collectively that they had worked with. So, step one in a case like that was we simplified their life, right? Most people, as they age, they want less complexity in their life, not just money, but in their life, they want less complexity as they get older. And they certainly don't want to leave a tangled web for people should they pass away, right? So we simplified, we consolidated, we got it down to a 403B or an IRA for each of them. And then we talked about, really to your point, what's the money for? What's the purpose? And what it came to was they don't have the ability to spend the money that we're making now in income, let alone this $900,000. In their mind, the $900,000 was for their children exclusively. They had other assets, by the way, and they said, we'll use those before we use these, right? So, we talked about what are your options, right? If the goal is to maximize an estate for your children with that kind of money, option one is, you invest it in an IRA, in a brokerage type account, and you get less aggressive as you get older, right? The closer you are to passing the nest egg on or using the nest egg, the less aggressive it'll ultimately become rightfully. Rule of thumb being, if it's money you need in 3 years or less, shouldn't be even exposed to markets. Second option, though, was to consider leveraging an annuity product that offered a death benefit, right? There's a lot of misinformation about annuities. Yes, they're not the cheapest out there, right? They have expenses. But in this case, because of the death benefit guarantee feature, right? $900,000 in this case, it would have been the amount you invest. If you could be more aggressive from an investment perspective in a variable annuity than you could be outside of it. Because let's say due to market volatility, the NAV, the market value dropped to $800,000 and you passed away. Your family would still get the $900,000 death benefit. So it enables you to be a little more aggressive. And it's got an annual, we would have paid for the annual rider that allows it to be benchmarked every year. So if the $900,000 became 1.1 million, that would have been the new high water mark, right? So it's, now what's that worth to you? In this case, the all-in expenses were about 2.8%. So they're not cheap. But in essence, the way we think about it is you're paying 2.8% a year to guarantee that it never goes down for your kids, and you can be a little more aggressive with it. The third option is, and this is not for the faint of heart, right? You got to write a big check. But the third option was you cash in the IRAs, you pay the taxes, you take the lump sum, and you lump sum capital transfer into a single premium second to die life insurance policy. And the idea is that, I don't know what that would have been, 900,000, let's say a third of it goes to taxes, and you put 600,000 lump sum into a second to die life policy with the lowest cost of insurance. What you have potentially is a life insurance death benefit that's greater than you could ever grow it to in the markets in your lifetime. You're really losing leverage. It's difficult for a lot of clients to write the check to the IRS. In this case, the client chose a hybrid. Right? They chose the annuity option and the brokerage option. So they did a little bit of all. There's never one way to do it, and it's never absolute. You can mix and match strategies. But there are ways to be creative about how you do this. So listen, Zach, that was really good. I hope what we convey is that there's, for the average American, there are ways to do what they're already doing more effectively in a lot of cases to make what they want to have happen. And I like your simple framework for thinking about what do I want to do and who do I want to do it for and when do I want to do it, and letting that sort of timeline be the guide for how you go about it. For those of you that, may be thinking about this at home, I just want to leave you with three things if you think about an action plan. Actually, a fourth. One is, think about, we call it discovering your mission, right? Think about the things that are important to you that you want to leave a mark. Maybe it is your church. Maybe it is your alma mater, right? Maybe it is your favorite nonprofit organization, Susan G. Komen, the American Heart Association, whatever it is that's near and dear to you. Think about what your value system is. Two is create an action plan, right? Learn more about that target purpose. Think about how you want to help. Is it your time? Is it your talent? Is it your leverage? Is it your money? Is it your network? How can you actually benefit those causes? And third is, allocate financial resources to achieve the highest impact. And that's where we can come into play with you, deciding where to give, how to give, the strategies, the vehicles, the timing, all of that's important. And maximize the opportunity to you in the form of tax benefits to do it. Thanks for joining us at Planning to Win. We appreciate it. We will look forward to seeing you next month. Next month, our focus really is year-end planning as we think about some must-do things that you got to do to end the year properly with year-end tax planning and things of that nature. And the second half of the month, we're going to focus on really thinking about what a proper jumping off point is to plan for 2024. Thank you very much for your time. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.